From Hot Springs via text message is our next question. I have basically driven myself to distraction trying to understand all the issues surrounding my upcoming retirement. I need help to focus on the most important things I need to be paying attention to as I get ready to move from working to my retired life. You're not alone, Robert. A lot of people have those questions, and we can start with the non-financial ones. I actually sat with a client just yesterday, John, that she's planning to retire at age 65, and she'll be 65 later this year in the fall. And obviously we're working through a planning process to determine their retirement income, if it's going to be satisfactory to them, and it was. They are now going to think about it. She's still not for sure, but she was able to see that this is going to be doable if she chooses to do it, but that's not the only consideration. The financial side is not the only consideration. We talked through, I told her, I said, do you have a plan for what you're going to do with your time? And she did. She outlaid all the volunteer things that she wanted to do, whether it's with church, at the school. But we tell people all the time you can't retire from something. You have to retire to something. Purpose matters here because we have had people who never look back, retired, and their life is changed forever, and they would never want to go back and work. And we have some people who can't stand it, and they go back to work.
Yeah, and Scott, I think that one of the big triggers on the retirement decision, if you stop and think about the complex decision-making process that you go through to decide to retire, the number one thing that is a trigger for people is knowing they can do it, knowing that they can have secure income coming in and then discretionary income on top of that, so they're not just living from hand to mouth and paycheck to paycheck, so to speak, but they really have a vision of what their retirement will look like both now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and that type of thing. And I think oftentimes people are asked by some people in our industry to take it on a probability. And I often say that, if you were going out to Little Rock National and getting on a plane and the pilot got on the speaker and said, okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're on our way to, Washington, D.C., but there's only about an 85% chance that we're going to make it. Yeah, I'd be getting off the plane pretty quickly. I'd just be like, stop the presses, let me out the door. But that's what oftentimes some financial advisors say is the right way to plan for retirement. Oh, we'll take 4% out, and there's about an 85% chance you won't run out of money while you're alive. Well, what happens if I'm in that 15% and I do run out of money? Right. That's a real challenge. And so having that answer is really the linchpin, if you will, or the pivot point that a lot of people need to be able to say, okay, I now feel good financially that I can make that decision. But like you said, Scott, there is a lot as far as the whole psychological makeup of a retirement decision is concerned that you have to go into. But I think their top priority is securing that future paycheck.
Yeah, and the process by which you should do that. This is also obviously a life event that triggers people to move towards reaching out to a financial advisor. Many times they have done the investment side of things on their own. Maybe they did a really good job, and if they had a good discipline at contributing and stayed invested in market-related instruments for a very long period of time, our track record now looking in the rearview mirror will tell us that they did do very well. But when it comes to that moment of change, we call it in the industry going from accumulation to decumulation. I don't like the word decumulation. I like distribution because we don't want to decumulate down to zero. We want to just distribute for your lifetime, which we don't know how long that's going to be. Seeking out a financial advisor who specializes in retirement income planning is key to covering all these issues. He talks about driving himself to distraction because it is complex. And the reality is, John, and I find myself even in the industry having to keep up with the changes that occur when it comes legislatively, tax-wise, Medicare, all of those things that change on at least an annual basis, it sure seems. You need a professional that's staying on top of that and creating a written plan on paper, on purpose, for you to be able to use as your guide through retirement. That's how you find that certainty, I think, in knowing that you're ready to retire financially.
Yeah, the complexity is ever-changing, but there are some things in there that are kind of almost mile markers that you've got to take care of. One of them is you got to figure out how to turn that 401k plan into an income stream. And you've also got to think about things like Social Security claiming strategy, pension options that you may have if you are blessed to have a pension. You have to also think about covering the shortfall. Oftentimes, there's Social Security, and that's all that you have as far as guaranteed income is concerned. But Social Security is not enough to cover your basic living expenses. If that's the case, then you've got to cover that shortfall or cover what I call the gap. And then you've got to think about how you're going to manage your assets in retirement so that they don't deplete and get into a death spiral, so to speak, and spend that money down way before you're ready for that to pass on to the next generation. So there's a bucketing strategy, avoiding a negative sequence risk that we take our clients through. There's diversification, and here's a big one. You have to be inflation ready. Man, did inflation bop us upside the head a couple of years ago when COVID hit and all the prices went crazy and everything. Everybody was going, oh my. How do I deal with this? Well, at Gen Wealth, if you have the ready to retire process working for you, then your plan is designed to increase your income over time. So those are all things that you've got to think about as you go through the complexity of navigating this thing called retirement.
Yeah, and I think to tack on to what you're saying there about inflation, we have a lot of people who, when they first come to see us before they are our clients at Gen Wealth, it can be very easy to get very conservative in your risk tolerance, your mindset about investing, because you don't want to lose anything that you've spent a lifetime gaining. Completely understand that. What that causes, though, is many times people will say, I'm just going to keep it in a CD, or I'm just going to keep it in a lockbox. And if I just take out X amount over the next 20 years, it's going to last that long, right? They're not thinking about the inflation component of that. You've got to be able to have some growth. And in the way we plan here, that happens on the back end of your portfolio, not what you're using today, not what you're using over the next 5 to 10 years, but on the back end, we're still invested in equities, still looking for long-term growth, because you have to be able to give yourself a pay raise. You wouldn't work at a single job for 20 years without getting a pay raise. Nobody would have done that. They would have jumped ship. Well, you don't want to jump ship in your retirement.
Well, and here's one other thing that adds to the complexity, and that is, what about healthcare cost in retirement? Obviously, your retirement years are the years when you're probably going to spend the most money on healthcare because your body's, aging and wearing out and things of that nature. So you've got Medicare. Now, Medicare sounds simple. I automatically get Part A. I sign up for Part B. I make a decision on a prescription health plan. I'm good. That is, unless you make over a certain amount of money, and then you're going to get introduced to my old Aunt Irma. I actually literally had an aunt. Her name was Irma. She's long passed away. But Irma is actually IRRMA. It is an acronym for basically means testing the cost of your Medicare. So if you make over a certain amount of money, or your income is more than a certain amount in retirement, they're going to charge you more for your Part B Medicare. Managing that is a huge deal. There are certain things that you can do in retirement to keep you under that IRMA threshold, where you pay the lower amount on Medicare Part B, but you have to know exactly how to manage that to get that lower Part B premium. Also, you've got to think about Medicare supplements. What's the right thing to do here? Scott, there's all kinds of advertisements out there for people to talk about and lure them into Medicare Advantage. We don't think Medicare Advantage for almost anybody is the right choice. We like traditional Medicare with a supplement as opposed to Medicare Advantage, because it does pigeonhole you in terms of providers and things of that nature. There's some benefits to it, but there's also some drawbacks to it. And so the Medicare supplement decision is a big deal. And then finally, your long-term care expenses. How are you going to decide to take care of those? Are you going to insure against those? Are you going to try to self-insure? Most people will never be in a situation where the state pays for your long-term care insurance. That is a pauper's program. That is Medicaid, not Medicare. And that's a decision that you also have to think through during your retirement planning.
And finally, a couple of more issues there. We're going to have to move on our questions, but estate planning, very key. Working with an estate planning attorney to determine your need for a will, a trust, medical directives, a financial power of attorney. There's a lot to consider on the back end of there. Nobody likes to think about the downside of retirement, which is getting older, losing cognitive skills, and eventually passing away. But you have to plan for those inevitabilities. And tax management. Most people who have saved for retirement have done so in qualified plans. Those are going to be taxable if they were put in on a pre-tax basis. So you have to be able to maximize or minimize taxes through maximizing a tax strategy. Listen, our best advice here when it comes to retirement, I think we've displayed, just answering this question, how complex the issue is. Step into the Gen Wealth Ready to Retire process. We cover all those things. Everything we just spent well over 10 minutes talking about, we cover in written planning in our Ready to Retire process. And I would encourage you to reach out and call us toll-free, 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526 to get connected with a financial advisor here at Gen Wealth and begin working through the Ready to Retire process to find out if you are, in fact, ready to retire. Congratulations to Robert. That's our question of the week. Thanks for reaching out. We would love to send you a free Get Ready for the Future Show tumbler for being the question of the week. Just email us. Send that email to show@getreadyforthefuture.com and claim it.